Great. Yeah, so Nick, thank you for having me. My name is Wes Fang. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Fire Department and at our IT department. I oversee a lot of the AI and data efforts here. Before joining the Fire Department, real quick background, I mostly was a developer. I worked at Sloan Kettering for 10 years, mostly working on Java and Oracle databases. And since then, I've kind of moved into more of a management and leadership role here at the fire department. I've been here for 10 years. And my portfolio mainly focuses on our electronic health records database and amongst a lot of other things. But really, the last 2 years, it's been an accelerated phase of onboarding new tools, new skills, new talent with a strategic focus on adoption of AI and deployment of various AI technologies. So real quick information about the fire department. I'm sure all of you uh, who are within a tri-state area know what we do. We're the second largest fire department in the world, the biggest in the nation, and we really work with great people. I mean, everything that we do here is really, truly the best. And I'm happy to really just kind of be part of this whole agency. Um, a bit more background about our IT department. So we have about, I'd say, 60 or so full-time employees that are split between application developers, database developers, business, QA, etc. And we have probably hundreds of vendors that we work with. And then specifically, I think the ones that my team focuses on is healthcare, set of healthcare suites. So when fire and EMS employees, they show up at an incident, right? There's definitely a lot of times they go into um, very kind of dangerous situations that sometimes they come out and they get injured, they take medical leave, they take light duty, and we have our own custom built EHR system that tracks, similar to the military, their duty status, whether or not they're fit for duty, they could be stationed on the truck. And ultimately, all of that information affects our agency's response time for incidents, right? So it's a very important system that we maintain. And we also have a lot of integrations with various vendors that does diagnostic testing against our members, all their data that comes back. We have connectivity to all of those. Um, it's almost like a small development shop here at the fire department. I have the pleasure of working with really smart, talented people, also with our vendors as well. Our main tech stack is a Oracle database. We also have Postgres, MySQL, but really our agency institutional databases in Oracle. Um, and a lot of our traditional uh, technologies we use to build our applications I've listed here as well. And the past 5 or 6 years, we spent a lot of time on doing more automation. So making sure that, going from requirements to all the way to a deliverable, we can, uh, version control of our code, making sure everything is compliant and scanned with our IT sec. And all of that, I think, was precipice led us to this point where we can kind of continue to do uh, our AI initiatives using the same exact fundamental process that we've developed here in the last couple of years. Some of our core applications is what's called CAD. It's our computer aided dispatch system. It's really central to the 911 system. That's one of our biggest systems that we have in conjunction with PD. And a couple of other applications. It's an incident command application. When the fire department, the fire trucks arrive at a scene, it used to be a kind of a whiteboard that the chiefs would kind of coordinate allocation of assignments, what units to go into where, right? But this entire thing has been developed as a mobile application now. And then, of course, the main application I oversee, which is our electronic health record system. Um, so over the years, one of I think the biggest challenges for us was that we are really good at building applications. And where we run into a lot of friction and pain points is when it comes to operational analytics. So we have historically gone through a lot of exercises with, if our analytics department needs information, we would have meetings and come up with data dictionaries, come up with some sort of data catalog. But all of that essentially was done in Excel, right? There would be a spreadsheet that we would share amongst those participants, the subject matter experts. And then we would kind of go in and have these various team members to do documentation against that data set. But over time, somebody would have a copy of that data set, make their own changes, or it gets lost. We have staff that goes to another agency, which happens quite often. And then that turnover, naturally, right, there's information that gets lost. So that has been really a big kind of pain point for us, because every time we go through this exercise again, we would have to start all over again, right? So, and then there's, this kind of institutional knowledge that is kind of siloed into certain teams and individuals, and it's really difficult to really trying to get their time and participate in this a process where we can kind of make this as a living document. So this became even more apparent when I think 2 years ago we started this path of trying to figure out how do we actually deploy a couple of generative AI pilots and demonstrate that this is something that is a very important technology that the agency needs to start looking at. We were very successful with those pilots, and one of them notably is a text to SQL pilot. So this is probably started about a year and a half ago, where we thought about, well, these LLMs are great at doing text generation, language translation. How do we actually see if we can make this a little bit more technical, where we have a lot of key users of our system? Typically, they would have to ask our development team to produce analytics, right? And there's always a turnover time, right? There's always a lead time to say, hey, well, we need these data sets and we need to do this analysis. Now let's get it over to our database developers, our data engineers. There's a whole cycle that goes on that typically takes, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, the fastest, right, before that data set is complete, and then hand it off to those stakeholders for them to do additional analysis on. So we said, well, can we actually use these LLMs to help us shorten that time, right? Can we actually say, if we give an interface through natural language, can they actually interrogate the database? And we were very successful with that. Again, that time we still use spreadsheets, right, to kind of document the data dictionary. We realized that once we created the semantic layer on top of our data schema, we would use that as the context for the LLM. It understands it, and then it can generate SQL statements against our database, which would answer some of those questions. Now, the problem was that we did this on a small scale, and once the leaderships, they all saw the value of this, they wanted to, essentially have the solution available for our entire agency database. Our database, Oracle, right, it's been around for probably 30 years at this point. So there's a lot of information in this agency database. And we knew that in order for us to scale this out, we have to look at how do we retool, reskill, upskill, and kind of figure out a way to make this more of a rinse and repeat process. So we got started last quarter of last year, and we started to evaluate these kind of platforms where we can shift away from Excel, right, and get on to some tooling where we can have a collaborative platform for various SMEs, data engineers, data analysts, all participate in making all this data kind of a living documentation. So we evaluated a couple of these tools, and after about 2 months of trying various things out, we stumbled upon OpenMetadata. Funny enough, this was actually something that we asked ChatGPT for at the time, and OpenMetadata was one of them that listed. And we said, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see what this is about, right? So after looking at it for about 2 to 3 weeks, we quickly realized the value of why this tool could fit for us, right? what would be good for us. I mean, one is that it was really quick, and a lot of credit to the OpenMetadata team to get onto social media, right, and start learning about this tool. So the YouTube videos were really good for us to kind of get started with. The documentation is great. A lot of these LLMs are pre-trained, right, as we all know, so that we can actually dive into the details about how certain functionalities work. Just because the information is not proprietary, right? It exists, and you can go in and start asking about how certain things work. The active ecosystem. So I definitely participate, and my team members have participated on the Slack channels to kind of get quick answers about certain functionality. So that's very helpful, right? We don't have to go through support, all of these other proprietary tools and have all these ticketing systems, right? Like that was always kind of a barrier to entry. And we understand that, in the long run, when things get more mature, there could be commercial support, right? So that's always good to have as well. But I think getting started for us really is that we can also deploy this on premise, right? That was a big also ask for our leadership as well. Some of this data has sensitivity associated with it, even though it's metadata. The fact that we can actually spin up a Kubernetes environment and quickly get this working, I think was also a big plus. So I think we're 5 months into this, and I want to talk a little bit more about, what was the next step. Once we decided to go with open metadata, we realized that this is one tool as part of a tool chain, and we have to develop processes associated with this new way of documenting information, right? So what I've listed here is a set of tools that we identified and installed and deployed. So part of this is that we knew in order to document information, we want to see if AI can help us with the documentation as well, right? So traditionally, again, the documentation existed in Confluence, in Word documents, but none of it was, what we were looking for. Something was off, we realized. And one of the things that we realized that we need to kind of lower that um, entry of making the information computable against the for the LLMs is that we want this information to be in markdown format. So one of our really smart engineers, um, you know, identified that, hey, maybe let's try Obsidian, which is a really popular tool. And then within there, you can actually do documentation, workflow charts, everything through Mermaid. It also has a big community, and OpenCode is a plugin that we can wire in, so you can have essentially a co-pilot kind of experience within Obsidian to help with the documentation, right? Review it. All of that is connected to an agent that is kind of self-improving. On the hostess side, once we completed this documentation in Markdown, we can use that information to then further enrich the information as schema objects in open metadata. And then, a couple of other tools that we have started to explore, which is the AI gateways. So we can actually switch between different LLMs to see how they differ in terms of accuracy. Um, and then real quick, I'm not going to kind of bore everybody on some of the conceptual stuff, but, the key point is that we realize that, with tooling, we have to also come up with the process, right? Where we have our subject matter experts and then giving them a set of tools where they understand that if they use these tools effectively, it can help them with documenting the underlying schema objects, the logic, a lot of the algorithms, and then it is easy to use. It's not something that is, a CLI or a VS Code or Toad, which is very common in the Oracle development community, right? It's a tool that they can go in and immediately start contributing, right? So we drew up some processes on how we think that um, it fits within our environment. This is going to be different for everybody, but this is kind of how we kind of figured it out. And then from that conceptual workflow, we actually started to say, okay, let's try this out, right? Let's get a business analyst, let's get developers involved in this, give them accounts in open metadata, and have them kind of go walk through this entire workflow. So what does this entail? Basically, as with all software development life cycles, with you start off with meetings with our stakeholders, right? You capture the requirements, and every one of these steps we're trying to kind of figure out, how do we actually automate, how do we actually make this simpler, right? So with transcripts now, right, we can pipe that into a documentation repository. This documentation repository is actually also hooked up to our open code agent, which then can help with templatizing the requirements. And then once the transcripts are in that repository and the business analyst wants to, or the product manager, right, wants to go ahead and create those requirements for the development team, they can go open up Obsidian, write out all the requirements using the open code agent to draft a template. And once that becomes available, developers goes ahead and builds out the actual enhancements. They those objects are then published. Imagine that these are tables or new columns, right? In the database, the metadata, open metadata database agent goes ahead and synchronizes that on a nightly basis. Then a team will log in the next day. They will see that, hey, there are changes in their objects that they own, goes ahead and makes those updates, right? That becomes this living process where information is kept up to date. So we've actually done this, and we're continuing to kind of scale this out with more team members participating in this process. Now, once this is all done, okay, now where's the ROI, right? Like, this is where we want to get to. Is I'm going to kind of briefly show. Let's see. Yeah, so this is Obsidian, and within here, right? Well, this is a typically business documentation. What I'm showing here is some what you would imagine as information about context about certain functionalities, certain business workflows, right? And this has the Mermaid plugin. We've got open code on the side, and what also is we found through this process and using this tool, which is good, is that business analysts, they're not developers. They don't work with VS Code. They don't work with GitHub directly. And what open code can do is that you can kind of just use natural language to work with GitHub commands, right? Ultimately, all this documentation gets committed into GitHub, and that's where the then an agent takes over, vectorizes it, and keeps that knowledge up to date so that it can cyclically help with further documentation. And here I'm showing an example where on the side you can see I am asking about whether or not there are changes locally, right? So if I make a change here, I could come in here and I could say, hey, can you check for changes? Yeah, there are changes, push them into the repo. Okay, now that it's in the repo, it also, there's a GitHub action that kicks off that updates the actual knowledge base or the vector database behind this, so that the agent, next time you ask it for helping with reviewing the documentation, it can give you that information. Now, how does this tie together with open metadata? You can see that once the developers move the objects into the database, right, next day those objects become available. Imagine that this is all blank, right? I have a view here, and this object represents the medical leave, the light duty status of the fire department, all the fire and EMS, active fire and EMS, right? And what they would do is they would come in here and they would use open code to say, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about the duty status data set, right? Because of all the transcripts, the documentation that already exists in this repo, it would give me this description, and I can go and then move that into this object, right? That's an open metadata. So the same you can imagine for all the columns, right? It has awareness of all of these columns because they're captured in the requirements, right? So for each one of them, I can go back to the open code agent and then ask it to help me with documentation for each of these columns as well, right? So that's kind of like the how we're kind of using these tools together to help with enriching the data set. So once this is done, right, we hand this off to our end users, right? Our end users being the analytics department. And what they could do is now wire this up to Claude. I have the session here where this is an actual session that we used where this is connected to the open metadata MCP, right? This is all configured. Sorry about that. And now imagine that I'm acting as the role of the analytics department and one of the users that wants to put together a dashboard for executive or operational reporting. They can come in here and say, hey, tell me about data sets you have access to related to medical leave, right? Within open metadata, it goes ahead, makes those queries against the MCP agent and that knowledge graph. It comes back with information that I'm looking for. It has awareness of all the views. We've actually started to work on more of the security part as well. But the idea here is that a individual who might not know all the data set, doesn't know SQL, they can still come in here and explore these data sets to kind of put together something that they can deliver to operations and executives, right? So again, this is just kind of a session that just demonstrates that through natural language, I can kind of explore these data sets. This specifically looks at back in, I think, the end of January, New York City got a hit with a big snowstorm, right? So when that happened, there were upticks of people calling out, and we wanted to kind of investigate, like, what's going on there, right? Are they calling out for what's called service or non-service connected duty, right, statuses? So this is part of this exploration, right? Can we actually put together some analytics that would give us insight into what's happening with the uptick of people calling out? So with this, ultimately, what we got to is, okay, we've identified this data set, and very lazily I said, go ahead and can you plot this for me, right? Give me a visualization for this. And let me see if I could just, yeah. So this is the what Claude did, right, with connections to that open metadata schema information. It goes ahead and creates this beautiful kind of graph and visualization for me, right? This is split by EMS and fire, you can see. And I really didn't have to do much, right? Once we've provided all the context, it really can just kind of go ahead and do this on its own. You can see the uptick. Really, it's around when this big snowstorm happened, right? And yeah, this is what we're working towards, is empowering our business users with the ability to build out these dashboards with very little technical knowledge, right? I think the main thing is as long as they have understanding of the business, right, they can go ahead and really get a lot of this done without developer intervention. Now, developers, their job's not going away. What they're going to be focused on is facilitating building out these data sets, right? I think even further concentration on that, as opposed to using these analytical reporting tools, right? I think that's historically what we use, a lot of the Oracle technology to do business intelligence and all of that. A lot of proprietary coding that goes into it. Slight digression, we want to move away from that. We want to focus more on enriching the data. And then once that's done, in terms of how to build these interfaces, I think we see a future where we can use the LLM to do all of this. Part of this data set also contains some prediction data that we have that's running on an H100 cluster. So all of that comes through as MCP agents that we can connect to Claude with, right? And the more of these developer kind of, the more of these agents that we connect to Claude, the more it has access to all the various data sets that we have in our system. And we've got this all automated, right? So that's just, this is the export from Claude you saw. Here is actually a deployed version of this that contains data up to today. And this is, we're using it. And this data set, what we figured out is once a power user can go ahead and use Claude to kind of generate these dashboards, one further step is to download this code, move it into GitHub, right? And we're kind of figuring out how to even simplify that, where they don't even need potentially a GitHub interface. But the idea is once you just download this code, you log into GitHub, you upload that code, right? The whole kind of SecDevOps pipeline takes over, deploys all of this, and immediately becomes available. Yeah, I think this is the main thing I wanted to show everybody. But again, really thank you all for the entire Open Metadata team. Really, I think we got through a lot of these steps of configuration and kind of starting to use all of this because all the work that you guys have been doing for it. So we really appreciate that as well. And Nick, thank you for giving me the platform to showcase a little bit about what we're doing here at the fire department.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear, and I'm glad that you found us. And shout out to ChatGPT, and thanks for all of this great work in presenting it. I'm really grateful to the entire open metadata community, but the fire department of New York in particular has a really fond place in my heart. Since my childhood, right? You all have been an inspiration and heroes, for many of us. So thank you for all of your work, and to see open metadata be a part of that. Just really grateful. So thanks for sharing.